Before we start, I'd just like to introduce myself and this webinar. We're talking about building API power with National Voter Registration Day, which is coming up very soon. My name is Sing Lee. I'm the National Field Director for APIAVote. I've been here at APIAVote for about a year now. I'm based in Minnesota, and we work with, and I work directly with partners, our partners throughout the United States. And then I'll pass it off to Hannah to introduce herself.
Thank you, Sing. Hi, all. My name is Hannah. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Florida field organizer with APIAVote. Happy to be here with you all.
Cool. Let's go to the next slide. APIAVote is a nation's leading nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to engaging, educating, and empowering Asian Americans and Pacific Islander communities to strengthen their voices and create impact. For decades, our action-driven organization has led national initiatives to ensure AAPIs are represented and heard. Next slide. We're proud to work with over 80 partners across 28 different states throughout our Alliance for Civic Engagement Network, also known as ACE. We support each other with lessons learned from different regions of the country and best practices so that we can all share it with one another. Next slide. Since 2020, we have seen tremendous growth where our AAPI growth rate is 1.2 times larger than the AAPI citizens voting age population. And once we're done with this webinar, we'll also be sharing these slides too, so you have access to some of these data points. Next slide. But we still have a lot more work to do. We're not at parity and lag behind the white and Black communities. There was a 10% increase in AAPIs who voted between 2016 and 2020, with the total number of ballots cast increasing dramatically. Largest jump of any, this is the largest jump of any racial group. Across 49 states with voting history, 49.4% of AAPI voters in 2020 didn't vote in the 2016 general, 31.9% among all voters. Across 49 states with no voting history, 23% of AAPI voters were voting for the first time. 12.2% among all of them other voters. Next slide.
Thanks for sharing more about the data and our growing community, Sing. So today we're going to talk about civic holidays, specifically National Voter Registration Day, which is next Tuesday. Civic holidays are a special way in which we get to remind our communities in a nonpartisan fashion about their role and their power in this election. So as you can see, there are several holidays, and they all fall on a particular day or range every year. And so, for example, in my home state of Florida, the National Voter Registration Day is about a month out of our registration deadline, which is in October. So this is the peak time to remind our folks what it means to be a registered voter and how to be civically engaged. And what's great is that not only do you celebrate this day by reminding your friends and your family to vote, if you sign up to be an NVRD partner, you actually can get stuff like posters, postcards, stickers, t-shirts, reminders, so that you can actually use that in your organization's programming. So if you want, you can scan the QR code here and sign up as a partner. So National Voter Registration Day, like I said, is next Tuesday, and many of our grantees around the country are planning events like picnics or game nights or tabling at their communities' grocery stores in order just to talk to our folks and remind them of the importance of voting. And like we said, this is a type of holiday that reminds people outside of candidates, outside of the party system, that they have a voice in our election. And the reason that we celebrate National Voter Registration Day is because, like Sing said, our community is still not at parity. Parity meaning that not everyone who is eligible to vote is registered or actually goes and submits a ballot every year. And until we do that, we are not living fully into our power as Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders to contribute to the policies that actually shape our lives, right? So 1 in 4 Americans in general are not registered to vote. And without reminders from our organizations, whether you're a student org or you're a 501c3, many people will not get the very important reminder that they need this year. And because you're in community, you have relationships with folks. So let's take advantage of it this year to remind people next Tuesday. What's really awesome is that we also provide a toolkit that you can use and promote on social media. Thanks to our communications team. They worked really hard to create a guide that is multilingual and graphics that you can freely use that advertises some of our resources. For example, our Asian voter hotline. So if folks have questions about registering or you don't know how to answer a question, you can actually call that number, and that's in the toolkit. At the same time, we're going to refer back to this later, but you can also use our customized Rock the Vote link, which we can share at the end of the webinar that you can use and just share with all of your friends. And it's available in 11 languages. So if people want to register in Thai or Tagalog, they can do that. I'll hand it back over to Singh to talk about how to actually conduct a voter registration drive.
Yeah, and it's important. The work that my NVRD is important, and the work that we do is we work with so many different partners throughout different states that everybody has a different skill set on how to conduct voter registration. So APIAVote is here to provide tools and resources to really be that 101 organization that provides the basic level of understanding what it is. And then, of course, we also offer any specific needs that is specific to any different states to give that more advanced level. But what we'll be going through is just really the basics so that we can all stay grounded and prepare for this year's NVRD. Let's go next slide. So who can vote? You have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to be 18 years and older. That's the basics to who can currently vote right now. Let's go to the next slide. And then what's important, as I've mentioned before, is you have to, for voter registration is really read up on the laws. Every state is very different. For me in Minnesota, voting is much different. Registering to vote is much different than being in Florida with Hannah. So Minnesota has easier access to voter registration, as opposed to Florida that has different laws that apply to each voter. Check if there is online registration available. Do I need a permit to register to vote? While you're at it, what is the next steps to also get an absentee ballot? So there's all there's these steps that you have to go through. Next slide. And then just for states that are currently do not allow online registrations include Arkansas, Montana, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, New Hampshire, and Maine. And then always have a game plan. Plan accordingly with upcoming election and their VR deadline timeframes. Who's your target audience? That's always something important to ask about. In particular for us, our audience is always the AA and HPI population. But we know that there's ethnicities that work within this coalition and this community, and that's something that's important to think about before you conduct that outreach. Compile links on a document so that you're able to send it over if needed, and have that information ready at the same time. Next slide. Recruit volunteers. We know this work is hard. Getting volunteers to do anything is very difficult, but always remember the rules of halves. You want to be able to, if you want 20 people to show up, find 300 good numbers. You need at least 40 people to commit if your goal is to have 20 people come out to help recruit and also help you register to vote. So this is important as we go through and talk about volunteer volunteer recruitment, and depending on how big of a universe you're working on for VR, that's based on how many volunteers you have to get to come in out and do this. Next slide. And then train your volunteers. Build a sense of community for your volunteers. ID purpose for activities and connections with overall goals. Review the rules, volunteer packets, and expectations. Role play. It's one of the most important things to do is try to get them into a conversation about especially if we're experienced organizers, what sort of conversations are they going to be engaged with when they're talking directly to folks. Next slide. And then 4 logistical reasons to register. Person has never registered before, they've changed address, they changed their name, and changed political parties. And then there are states that also are purging voters, like Wisconsin and Georgia. So it's good to also recheck your voter registration status at the same time. Next slide. And then that's why then what would I say? It's train your volunteers on when they're going out to talk to folks at an event or on the doors. Find out why an individual is saying no. You can agree with them, use a reason to convince them, and then ask if you can help them fill out the registration form and turn registered voters into volunteers or members, depending on how the conversation is going. Next slide. And pocket asks are really important. They're follow-up questions to asks to what you're asking for VR. So if somebody comes back and says they're already registered to vote, ask them if they can volunteer. Change their if they also have changed their address, and then if you can count on them for the next for this upcoming election, and then try to ask them if they're prepared to vote by mail at the same time too. So there's additional follow-up questions that you can even using VR as a way to also talk to registered voters about this year's election. Next slide. And most importantly, do not offer prizes or compensations in exchange for registering to vote. This is bribery and it's illegal. If you want to do something, it'd have to be freebies, coupons, etc. You must offer it to everybody. Next slide. And like any good organizing and planning for especially events, plan ahead, have all your materials ready, check in, check out, remind volunteers to be proactive, smile, approach people, don't sit behind the table, read their body language, talk about issues that people care about, practice and practice. Next slide. So just overall, again, said this is primarily a 101 for NVRD. Said we know that everybody works at a different level, but the most important things are read up on your laws, your state laws, establish your game plan, recruit volunteers, train volunteers, and execute events. And then when in doubt, make sure if you don't know a particular law, you can also always check the Fair Election Center with the website that's here below. And then you can also direct them to our online voter registration tool, Rock the Vote, that's in different languages. And the link is here, and then we'll also be providing this via recording and also as a slide for everybody.
Cool. Thanks, Sing. I think it's my turn now to talk about common mistakes on a form. So, filling out the paper voter registration form, it sounds easy, but there's some pretty common ways in which we can mess it up. And if you do that, unfortunately, it does create another barrier to yourself or for maybe your friends or your family who you're trying to get registered. Just as a note for people, for example, if you're in Florida and Texas, there are restrictions around paper forms. Some states, for example, have like a specific barcode on the form that tracks the form. You have to return it by a specific date. So we're going to go over paper mistakes, right? But an easy way to get around that is by using online tools just like Rock the Vote, like we mentioned. So name order is pretty important. For some of our community members, depending what part of the world you're from, you might put your surname first. Make sure folks use their legal name and not just a pseudonym or their nickname. Make sure that it's legible. You're using only blue or black ink. And yes, we're talking about county. not country. You'd be surprised. All right, so here's an example of Eric, who is an alumni of APIAVote, filling out a fictional registration form. So we can see his name, his address. Apparently he lives at the APIAVote office. But you can see that at the very top, he forgot to indicate whether he was a citizen of the US already, or if he was already 18 years old. Just like Singh said in the beginning, those are the very basic requirements. And if someone is not a citizen yet and attempts to register to vote, it can actually seriously jeopardize their naturalization process. So we want to be really careful when we talk to people, whether they are a citizen or will be a citizen before November 5th this year. Here we can see Christine Chen, our illustrious executive director, also filling out a voter registration form back in the year 2019, I see, and unfortunately, it is not legible. She's also apparently not 18 years old, and thus she cannot vote. In certain states, you can pre-register, like in Florida, if you're 16 or 17, but you do have to wait until your 18th birthday. So there we go. Oh, she also missed the box number 1 around salutations. Not legible. And I'll throw it back to Singh to talk a little bit about best practices for National Voter Registration Day.
Yeah, so the most important part of is, you know, prepare to have your public ass when you're engaging. Have fun. I think it's important that when you're doing a lot of these events with your volunteers, that you're engaging them at the same time, and have a lively mood, and make sure that these events are friendly for everybody. Next slide. And then encourage, and then put it on the map. Post your NVRD event, and also make it public so that these events are something that is accessible for everybody.
And
then
thanks.
Are you?
Oh, go ahead.
Yes. Sorry. And then I'll pass it over to Hannah for the examples for the NVRD registration.
Thank you, Singh. So this is just an example of one of our grantees, Asian Community Development Council from Las Vegas, and what they did for National Voter Registration Day way back in 2022. They did join us on that year's webinar. And so this is just a review of what they shared. So that year, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once came out. Who can forget? And so what a great way to engage with our community in an entertaining way, right? We want to keep it fun. So you can see if they gave out matcha, every single person got matcha, whether they registered or not. And they also were able to get some earned media via CNN, it seems, around the importance of Asian Americans in Las Vegas voting. So if you can get earned media, that's a huge bonus for you. They also went to go talk to folks, and they printed out their own custom postcards. That's a great way, an artistic way to engage with people. And it allows for people to reflect on what issues are motivating them this year. So you can see this person is pledging to vote. They could choose multiple reasons. And that's a perfectly nonpartisan 501c3 way to talk about the election this year and what's at stake. On the online realm, they took advantage of how many of our community members are playing Animal Crossing, or I believe were during a time of quarantine and connecting with each other. So you can see they have customized APDC apparel. Hopefully they have more of that this year. And yeah, they were able to engage with people offline as well. So thinking about this year, what are your opportunities, either in your local area or in the broader Asian American Pacific Islander culture that can bring people together and make the conversation around the election, around voting, which aren't always easy conversations. How can you lower the barrier for that and make it something more friendly and engaging? And they also did a TikTok series, which I think is pretty genius. Oh, and Pokemon Go, getting people to actually walk their communities. I wonder if there's a newer app these days that gets people to walk. All right.
Cool. Well, we're coming up towards the end of our presentation. Are there any questions that anyone has for us? You can type it down, raise your hand. All right. Doesn't look like we have any questions. So remember, sign up for our NVRD, API vote, NVRD sign up 2024. Next slide. And then thank you all so much for being here today. So if you want to connect with us, you can always check out our website at apiavote.org, or you can also email Hannah and I directly. We'll send that information over when we send out the recording and also send out the slides.
Thank you, everyone.